Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Nationals podcast. It is Monday, the 11th of April, 2022. And joining us tonight is Matt Weyrich from NBC Sports Washington. Little piece of news. The Lerner family might be selling the Nationals, or they might be looking for people to come in and become minority stakeholders in the organization. It's a story that Matt's been all over today. And we're about an hour away from the Nationals playing baseball, a little bit less. And we're going to talk about, this kind of big story. It's kind of going to be, sure, going on for a while now and going to kind of hang over the Nationals as we move forward. So a whole lot of angles. Matt and I will break it down right after this.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Josh Neighbors here, host of the Locked On Nationals podcast. Matt Weyrich, he is a contributor to NBC Sports Washington. Matt's going to be joining us, though. We just talked about this weekly for an appearance here, and we always have so much fun whenever Matt's on. Good conversation. Also, Matt, your job this week, you're going to give me a little bit of a break. People can stop hearing my riddled voice. I have the allergies like nobody's business. It's that time of the year on the East Coast. So I appreciate you stepping in as the stronger voice in the podcast, and also appreciate you, coming on hopefully weekly now.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Josh. It's always a great time being on here. Love talking ball with you. And we're just getting started here. Season's, 4 games in out of 162. They weren't the prettiest of games, but we'll be here covering them all. So it'll be a ride for sure.
So story comes out today from the Washington Post, and you have your own version of, the version of the story. But you had to aggregate a little bit. So Barry Saluga, right? Get that right? Saluga?
You're getting it right. Yep.
Of the Washington
Saluga.
Post had a story about the Lerner family. They are now interested in selling the team / finding people to become minority owners or other parties. Whether that's one party or multiple parties, I'm going to start there. That part's not clear, right? It would, it's not clear if it's going to be one party getting 49% or multiple parties, 20, 15, 10, right?
Yeah, going off of Barry's reporting, it definitely seems like all options are on the table for the Nationals right now. They have hired a New York firm. Let me get the name of it. It was Allen and Company, a New York investment bank, to look into potential suitors, both from just selling the team point blank and from coming on as minority owners. So as of right now, they have not determined what the next steps are going to be. This is more of the exploratory phase. So definitely going to have to stay tuned as things progress.
So this is to me is interesting. This is just me reading the tea leaves, giving my own thoughts on this. So Mark Lerner takes over the operations in 18, right? You have a whirlwind of things happening, including 18, you lose Bryce Harper, right? 19, you win a championship. 20, you have COVID, and also you have the 21, the trading away of so many championship pieces, and now we're here in 22, where it's rebuild / what are you going to do with Juan Soto? So I could see somebody who has had that variety of all those things, who's in a position of power, and Mark Lerner saying, you know what? I have somebody who's run this, company or, this franchise, have kind of gotten the experience of everything. I'm not sure I want to go through the rebuild here and do all of these things. Now, that could just be completely wrong. But to me, the timing is really interesting. But if you take a snapshot of the Nationals, their timeline, basically the last 4 seasons, it's so much has happened to them. It's hard not to think that doesn't play a role into this.
Yeah, I should note that in the Washington Post article, it doesn't specifically say why the Lerners are exploring
exactly.
this particular out at this time. But from a purely speculation, with COVID having the impact that it did, the Nationals have not been a very spend happy team. In fact, they're spending right now, especially this season, but also last year, the trades that they made did help them uh, decrease their payroll significantly, it's kind of showing that they're a little bit cash strapped right now. The Nationals
Right.
haven't signed a multi-year contract since Patrick Corbin. Let that sink in. He's in year 3 of this contract. Or I should say year 4, 19, 20, 21. Yeah, this is year 4 of his contract. And we literally haven't seen the Nationals sign a multi-year deal since. And when Mark Lerner took over in 2018, that was also the last time that the Nationals exceeded the luxury tax. So they've just been more of a spend-conscious team generally under his leadership, which is common when the older reign kind of hand things down to the younger. The older owners tend to be ones who say, I'm old enough, let's spend more money and win a championship, whereas,
Right.
Mark Lerner kind of looking more toward the long haul, trying to get the team under the luxury tax and on a more sustainable spending bracket. So I don't really know what the reason is, but it certainly seems like they don't have as much money as they used to. In Barry's article, he did point out that the learner's net worth has dropped by over $1 billion since the start of the pandemic. That's a lot of money lost. I mean, Ted Lerner, when he took over as owner of the Nationals, was one of like the 3 richest owners in baseball at
Right.
that time, and he has certainly slipped down those rankings to this point. Not even just with the addition of Steve Cohen at the top. All that money lost from commercial real estate is where all the learners' money comes. And that's like building office buildings, right? Like office space. Who's going into the office these days?
Right.
Like
Right.
there's a lot fewer people than there used to be, and that's not good news for Lerner Enterprises. So I would imagine that they're working with significantly lower revenue streams than they were a couple of years ago, and having not got extra revenue from the championship because of the pandemic, that's really have got to hurt them. So whether or not they bring in to take over the team fully or to come on as a minority owner remains to be seen. My gut tells me that they are going to try to retain some kind of stake in the team. But it's all kind of up in the air at this point. So we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think you'd want to do that, right? Because it is such a, I mean, baseball teams, we've seen this, despite what they'll tell you about the pandemic, you're still gonna make money off of it, right? And so getting a chunk of that, getting a piece of that is something, as from a portfolio standpoint for that family, makes a lot of sense. Um, but you're spot on. And I know people might say, well, real estate's done really well. Commercial real estate, like you mentioned, is the one area where I can't speak to the market, but you think like there are companies now, that are hesitant on how much they want people in the office. I work for SiriusXM, and I have not been back in the office, since 2019. And why would a massive company like that, if they're thinking about expansion, definitely put it on hold. Companies, give an example on the college side, the Pac-12 is, they've spent a ton of money on their office space in San Francisco. They're saying, no, we're going to have a lot of people work from home. We're going to cut costs. I can promise you, there's not the only companies that are doing it. So that's a great point. It does make a lot of sense. You factor that in with the uncertainty of the future. Yeah, it's a difficult time to be, involved with the Nationals, but I think every fan's mind at first is going to go to Juan Soto, right? This is the big key now. How do you renegotiate with a player when he's not sure if you're the one signing the checks, or he's not sure how much money you want to put into the team, not just for his contract, but for the other contracts around? You made a great point saying the Nationals have no multi-year contracts on the books. One that we've been talking about, saying this would be a no-brainer. Just lock up Josh Bell. Just do it. They don't even want to do that. So I think Juan Soto is the first place people's minds go to, because it's like, all right, this is another level of uncertainty. And I have to say, this point in time, this is a minus in the do I want to re-sign with the Nationals category, at least for the time being. At this moment in time, I think it's a negative notch. He's under contract at the end of next year, so they obviously have time to find somebody else, influx of cash, encouragement to spend more, all of those things. But in the immediate, this clouds something that Mike Rizzo said was his number one priority.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a player thinking about signing a deal of 10 to 15 years, you want to know that there's going to be stability during those 10 to 15 years. You're going to want just as much stability in year 1 as you're going to want in year 15. And if you don't know if the same owner that you're signing a deal with is going to be there by year 3, I mean, it definitely puts some murkiness on it. And like you said, it's definitely a negative. on Soto's side in terms of willingness to sign. I mean, Scott Boras even came out and said last offseason that Soto's number one priority is winning, and he is only going to sign with the club that he feels confident is going to be able to annually put out a winning product. And so far the Nationals, haven't really been showing him that they could do that. He came into the league in 2018, didn't make the playoffs that year. Came in 2019, they made it as a wild card team, and then the 2 years since, they've been at the bottom of the National League East. So Soto, for all the years that the Nationals were, perennial contenders, he's only seen one of those seasons. And so for him, it's a very different scenario
Right.
than trying to convince a guy like Steven Strasburg to resign, who, was in the playoffs every other year. It's just been a very different situation for him. We've only seen Soto in the playoffs for one season, and it was a remarkable run. And so we've at least gotten to see him, at the top of the game. But he's got to see it again, and that's the whole goal, is the Nationals to probably build a contender before he leaves again. And this kind of draws a murky picture of that. So if I'm Soto now, this is giving me a little bit of pause. Certainly at the end of the day, if the money's right, he could, and he likes the pieces that are around him, he could decide to sign. But I can't feel super excited about what this does for his chances of sticking around DC long term.
Quick word from our sponsor. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline and BetOnline.net. I'm sure they're going to have odds out pretty soon if Juan Soto will stay with the Nationals. You probably bet on that at BetOnline and BetOnline.net. Major League Baseball, basketball, playoffs, NHL playoffs, F1, NASCAR, golf, all those things are available at BetOnline and BetOnline.net. It's your number one source for all sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs to esports and more. Head to the website today on any device that you've got, as long as you're over 21 years old. You guys can sign up. It's free to do at BetOnline and BetOnline.net. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. So to that end, I want you to take your reporter hat off, all right, and put on your, there it is. It's off. It's back on. It's so just think about it from this perspective. There's two ways you can go here, right? Number one is the simple way I think to think about this. All right, if we don't know who the new ownership is or what ownership looks like, it's safe to say that a deal will not get signed of this magnitude until a new ownership is found, right? You could re-sign a Josh Bell under old ownership. That makes sense. You cannot sign a guy who might make $500 million, which is 1/4 of the entire, of the entire evaluation of the franchise, according to Forbes. You could not sign a deal like that without new ownership. Or you might go the other way, Matt, and you could say, well, if you want a better valuation of the asset or raise the price, you do, sign that contract. So personally, what do you think is the better strategy? If you're just, and look, we don't have this kind of money at our disposal. We don't understand what it's like to have this money at our disposal. I promise you, few media people do, and I can't think of any. But like, what do you think is, out of those two options, makes more sense to you? We're not going to see it, or sign it to raise the value.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it comes down to, what's more enticing to you as a prospective buyer? Is it the Nationals with 15 years of Juan Soto involved, or is it the Nationals with 3 years of Juan Soto involved? And, obviously Soto's going to come at a massive price, but, $400 million over 15 years is one of the best hitters in baseball with an enigmatic personality. Worth that? Probably. He puts butts in seats. He gives fans a reason to come to the ballpark. I was looking at the cherry blossom unis this weekend with my girlfriend, and we were going over what player would be the best to buy. And they only made a few select players available. It was like Soto, Ryan Zimmerman, Steven Strasburg, Josiah Gray. I mean, that was it. And It was like, of those options, what case can you really make
Soto
for anyone not named Soto? Like, he's just the guy on this team. And certainly if you had other stars around, that might, make it easier to swallow, him leaving at some point. But, the Bryce Harpers are gone, the Trey Turners, the Max Scherzers. There's not a whole lot that's going to be put in the butts and seats this year. And, obviously Keibert Ruiz, Josiah Gray, Cade Cavalli, all these young guys that they have coming up, those guys could turn into something. But if you're selling the team right now, they're not really going to put much, into a prospective buyer's valuation. they're just going to look at the farm system as a whole and say, hey, this is a bottom 10 farm system in baseball. Is that really something that I'm supposed to get super excited about? No, probably not. It's not going to, raise the price for me at all. So, maybe it does. It is like in the Lerner's best interest, whether or not they stick around or not, to sign Soto to a long-term extension, because he'll be worth that money. He'll be worth every cent. Obviously, withstanding injury, things like that. But, if he
Right.
plays out the entirety of that deal, there's no reason to believe that he wouldn't be worth it, and then some. So, for me, I would say, sign him either way.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, is it's gonna be so painful if he walks for Nats fans. I know they want a title after Bryce, but if like I know saying take the title out of it, but having two generational talents on the team and letting them both walk, to me, is just, it's malpractice. And I understand the money side of not an owner, you don't understand what it's like, but like, what's the point of the exercise, right? The point of this exercise is to have great players. In the 2019 Bryce Harper case, he walks, but it's not like the Nationals aren't committing to big long-term deals with quality players and have built a really good roster. They knew he walked, and they had a guy, they didn't know what Soto was at the time, but I mean, who became a star. It's not like they weren't paying other guys and had a team that could win. Bryce even mentioned when he left, I could see them winning. This is different now. You can't let him walk under these circumstances, even though there is some transition, because like, what is this? What is this asset worth? Like what is this asset worth if there's no clear star and face, no matter who else is on the team? Like you mentioned, Matt, asses and seats, what it's all about, and jerseys on backs. I mean, you went to the game yesterday. You'll see some Worths. You'll see some older guys, maybe probably still Scherzer jersey or two. But like, was it not close? Was it Soto mostly?
It's all Soto. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, you'll get the nostalgic Zimmerman jerseys, the Scherzers.
right.
I even saw a few Michael Morse jerseys out
Yeah.
there, but
It was some
those
ones,
are
yeah.
not the guys that are
Right.
on the team that you're getting excited about these days. It's Juan Soto and then his supporting cast. And if you were to keep Josh Bell around, so on a long term deal, or Cavalli comes up and he starts to impress, like, yes, those are obviously going to be great additions long term, but it all comes down to Soto. And the Nationals' prospects of contending in the near future and the long term future hinge on their ability to sign him long term. Because I mean,
And good.
if you feel like he's out of your price range, are you trading Soto? I mean,
Right.
we're 3 years out from free agency, right? And the best time to trade a player in
Yeah,
order to
well, he
capitalize
comes
on
he
their
comes
peak
he comes
value,
available end of what year? It's what year?
2024.
Okay, so it's two more seasons. I always forget which year it is. So
Two
so they
seasons
got
after
him.
this one, yeah.
Yes, so they've got him still for a good amount of time. Um,
But as we saw with Trey,
right.
the time to trade him is 2 years out, and that's what they did with him. And that's when the guy, if you want to maximize your prospect return, the difference between trading a 2-year player out from a 3-year player out is not as different.
Substantial.
It's not as big as it is 2 years to 1 year. Because when you trade a guy 1 year out, the market in the last 5 years has shown that you are not going to get that mega prospect that you need to kind of kickstart a rebuild. And that's exactly what the Nationals without Soto would have to do.
Yeah, and I don't want to say I ever feel bad for people in this position, but like Mike Rizzo, I kind of feel bad for, because you can mention the Josh Bell thing. Like, you can generally operate on those contracts. Sure, you need ownership approval, but like that's usually within your means, right? It's normally something that's kind of within your means. I'm not even sure if it is anymore, but with no multi-year contracts. But you know, this guy goes and says on television, like, priority number one is Mike Rizzo, is Juan Soto, and now we don't know where the money's going to come to make that happen. So when he is the guy who's doing the negotiating, he really can't make many promises right now unless the Lerners step up and say, all right, we'll make the commitment to raise the value of the asset. I want to talk more about Rizzo and Martinez. First, one more quick word from our sponsors on today's show. Today's show is brought to you by rockauto.com. If your car is breaking down or just needs anything like carpet, tail lamps, anything like that, you guys can find it at rockauto.com. It's the best place to go. You guys can choose any part really that you need without the long waits. Just find it at rockauto.com, and don't spend 30, 50, even 100% more from a chain store or a car dealership. Go to rockauto.com today. Right, Locked On there. How'd you hear about us box? That way they know we sent you. Amazing selection, always low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. That's rockauto.com. So, Matt, the next part of this is, what does this mean for the future of Dave Martinez and Mike Rizzo? Because there is always this idea in sports that when a GM changes, coach's protection leaves, right? When an athletic director leaves, coach's protection leaves. When an ownership leaves, sometimes the new ownership wants their way. Steve Cohen's a great example, right? With the way he came in the Mets. So your protection, if it's a minority stake, right? Or excuse me, majority stake, that goes away. So then the Nationals being in a rebuilding state right here, like this is a really interesting situation. I know Rizzo and Martinez are further down the line, but there is some overhauling, I think, inevitably with any ownership switch at the majority standpoint. Did you think about that at all today? Did your mind go there at all? Did you think about the fact that, hey, there could be a different face potentially? Going back and forth with Scott Boras and Juan Soto.
Yeah, it wasn't my immediate reaction. I feel like if this sale were to go through, it's going to take some time. I would expect, months at least, into the next offseason, whatever it is. And I imagine that, Martinez and Rizzo are, have their jobs pretty secure through this season, considering the expectations. They're not being evaluated on necessarily the wins and losses this year. So, maybe their leash shrinks if a new owner were to come in. It would be an owner that didn't go through the 2019 World Series, so they don't have the nostalgia holding them, to these guys like it would with the Lerners. So certainly it couldn't be a good thing, but Rizzo's been here long enough that I think that he earns some of that respect in that he can kind of weather multiple eras of this team. Martinez, maybe not so much. He's only had one winning season as a manager thus far, and for varying degrees of different reasons. Some his fault, some not his. That's not necessarily being held against him, but he's also the longest tenured manager in Nationals history by games managed. So, he's got a degree of respect that way as well. So, it's kind of a guessing game, but I do think that the leashes would probably not be as long with the new owners coming in.
Yeah, I am that's one thing that's going to be super interesting because there's so many different angles with this. And then if there's minority ownership, how much input do those minority owners have? How kind of how much at the forefront are they? How public are they? Is it for influx of cash reasons? I just think there's so many different ways this could go, but it all kind of roads do lead to Juan Soto. I would say also this year too, in terms of odds, like Dave Martinez is top 10 in terms of odds as the first manager to be fired. So they're not putting him in a place to succeed, to be honest. I mean, I'm not sure what the hell he's supposed to do with this roster, to be honest. One guy made it through 5 innings this weekend, one on the pitching
Yeah.
side of things. So any, any evaluation here would be, I think, unfair to say the least. But there is something to be said. Hey, look, if you own the team and want to say a 20, like you said, like I don't have any memories of 19. 2019 is 2019. Thank you, Davey, for what you gave to us. I'll see you. I'm going to make some changes because it's a brand new team, different things. Yeah, I mean, you can't blame the ownership, new ownership in this case for that. So, what do you think timetable? I mean, it's going to be a pretty lengthy process. And I think there's going to be a long period of time where, we don't really think about it. And then we'll hear somebody's interested in buying it. Dan Snyder, dear God, if that happened, that'd be awful. Is interested in buying the Nationals after he gets pushed out of owning the Commanders, right? Do you kind of see this being an ebbs and flows news cycle in a way?
Yeah, and I think that the learners would take their time with something like this. I mean, who knows? Maybe the team surprises some people and puts together a solid winning year and generates some excitement in the second half, and they exceed revenue expectations. You never know, right? Like there's no reason to rush a decision like that when so much money is on the line. I mean, we are
Right.
talking a $2 billion sale. So that's at least what Forbes estimates as the team's valuation. So it's not something that I would expect to get done before the end of the season. Like I said, when I think about other teams that were sold, The Wilpons selling the Mets, I believe that was a 2-year process. The Marlins being sold as well did not go quickly. So, I would not expect, any immediate results here. And like you said, we're probably going to go a while without hearing anything. And then one day, some news story is going to drop and we're all going to just be like, whoa, I forgot that was even happening. So, we'll see. It's probably we'll get some more clarity on it, as we get toward the off season. But we don't really, as the media, hear from the Lerners very much in terms of like direct interviews or anything like that. So, I would expect to go long distances in between updates.
All right, Matt, where can people find you and your work and all of its variety?
I'm on Twitter at @ByMattWeyrich and over at NBCSportsWashington.com, where you can check out all of my stuff from opening weekend. Last weekend was my first time in the clubhouse, and every reporter's first time in the clubhouse since 2019. So it was pretty awesome to be back to catch up with a lot of these guys who I hadn't seen. I hadn't shaken Davey Martinez's hand in 3 years, so that was good just to kind of reconnect there. It's an exciting time. It's maybe not necessarily for the Nationals, but baseball is back. And getting to know these guys, figure out how they click again. We're in store, I think, for some cool stories coming through this year, and I'm excited to be part of the coverage.
Yep, already one story. It's pretty cool. Lucius Fox. I mean, that's it's, and also like with the kind of guys that the Nats will be calling up, there's gonna be a lot of those. He drove overnight in his Pontiac Aztek.
8-hour Uber drive.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So you're in for some good stuff. I think we all are too. Matt, it's always a pleasure, man. We'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.